Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm Amanda Pinatih, the design curator of the Stedelijk, and I'm very excited to be here today together with the Françoise van den Bosch Foundation and its board, jewelry artist Lauren Kalman, Dr. Meredith Jones, Monique Hendricks, and of course you, the audience. Thank you for being here, here in the room with us, but also online. And we're very happy to be able to collaborate with the Françoise van den Bosch Stichting, as it is such an important platform for the promotion of contemporary jewelry. The collection of the foundation and that of the Stedelijk Museum complements each other very well, and I'm very proud that we have the collection of the foundation here on long-term loan. Body adornment in contemporary life emphasizes the performative properties of objects we wear to signify belonging, confer status, or project power. Adornments have distinguished their owners in cultures worldwide for centuries, enhancing the appearance, granting access, and amplifying authority. These distinctive markers enable people to move fluidly through a range of identities as instruments of social influence, participating in a shared cultural language based on existing hierarchies and stereotypes. And it's exactly this potential that jewelry has that makes it so interesting to also show it in a museum context. You can see a number of pieces from our collection and that of the foundation, like those of Noem Passama and Marit van Heumen, in our new collection presentation, Tomorrow is a Different Day. Together with my colleague Thomas Castro, the curator of graphic design, I designed different steps in two of the rooms where you can sit on. And these tribunes, they have built-in vitrines specially designed to display jewelry. So you can sit and look at the jewelry up close and reflect on them. And I would love to show you through these two galleries when time permits later on. But now I would like to give the floor to Martijn van Oostroom, the chair of the foundation.
Thank you, Amanda. Let's adjust this for the one tall person this afternoon. Welcome on behalf of the Françoise van den Bosch Foundation. Welcome, Lauren. Welcome, speakers, jewelry makers, friends of the foundation, designers, students, collectors, and of course, welcome to family members of Françoise. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for a special and a festive event. And thank you, Stedelijk Museum, for co-organizing this symposium with us. The Françoise van den Bosch Foundation is named after one of the most prominent Dutch jewelry designers of the last century. Françoise is a contemporary of a generation of Dutch jewelry makers like Gijs Bakker, present, Emmy van Leersum, Marion Herbst, and Anne Boekhout. Her work can be found in many collections all over the world, including, of course, here at the Stedelijk. After her sudden death in 1977, her friends, colleagues, and family felt that something of her creative spirit needed to be preserved. In 1980, now 41 years ago already, they conceived the Françoise van den Bosch Foundation. The aim of the foundation hasn't changed in those 41 years. It's still to stimulate and to promote contemporary jewelry design. In the last decades, the foundation has initiated several programs to stimulate and promote jewelry. From the start, there was the biannual award, more about that later, of course. But the foundation also owns a large collection of contemporary jewelry, the collection that was started actually by Françoise when she started to exchange work with her contemporaries. Since 1980, major pieces of jewelry have been acquired, mainly, of course, by the award winners. But we also have a program for young talent. And every year now we acquire work by young talent. And actually, as of this year, we also have a slightly change in the program. We also acquire work by mid-career artists. And the first edition was made last month by buying a pendant by the Swedish-based duo Conversation Piece. Apart from collecting Every year the foundation invites jewelry makers from abroad for a residency. In the past we've welcomed young makers, as far as from New Zealand and Argentina, to work and live 3 months here in Amsterdam. Of course, last year we couldn't have the residency because of COVID, but we're hoping to see Estonian jeweler Triin Cook next year here in Amsterdam. The foundation, however, is most visible through its biannual Françoise van der Bosch-award, now recognized worldwide as the most important award in the field of contemporary alpha jewelry. Today we are honoring the work and unique voice of visual artist Lauren Kalman with a symposium and an award. We've timed this afternoon so it is part of the Amsterdam Jewelry Festival Obsessed, held at many locations here in the city, but also elsewhere in the Netherlands and now also in Belgium. Lauren Kalman is a maker of objects relating to the body, creating wearable objects as well as performative pieces and installations that expand the concept of the body ornamentation. Her practice is a crossover between craft, performance and visual art. While not per se a jewelry designer, her work has a huge impact in the field of contemporary jewelry. Lauren's work is expanding the notion of what jewelry can be or how it can be perceived, a notion that was also expressed by Françoise and her contemporaries. The challenging suggestions by Lauren Kalman for body adornment are of an emancipatory nature, investigations, notions of sex, gender, power and beauty. Although quite different in outcome and aesthetic, these notions were also central to the work of Françoise. Ideas of the body as a powerful object for an emancipatory message are still relevant today, as this symposium will address and expound on. I hope you enjoy today's program. Amanda?
Thank you. Thank you, Martijn. Well, let's get this show started. I would like to welcome Dr. Meredith Jones to the stage. Dr. Meredith Jones is a feminist theorist of the body with expertise in gender studies, visuality, and popular culture. Her most recent book, Beautyscapes, Mapping Cosmetic Surgery Tourism with Ruth Holliday and David Bell, won the Foundation for the Sociology of Health and Illness Award in 2020. She hosted a scholarly Kymposium in 2015 and Kymposium the sequel in 2021. And Meredith is also the director of the Institute for Communities and Society at Brunel University, London. In her keynote, she will discuss contemporary manifestations of femininity, including vulva, vagina, as techne, her theory of media bodies, and Kim Kardashian West. Drawing upon the new disciplines of surface studies, she will consider the expressive and political meanings of glitter and of matte black in terms of femininity. Welcome, Dr. Meredith Jones.
Hello everyone. I'd like to begin by saying it's a very great honour to be here. I'm absolutely thrilled. Apart from anything, this is the first live talk I've given in 2.5 years. I've been stuck on Zoom, stuck in Zoom maybe, like many of you, so it's really thrilling to be here in this beautiful city that I've never visited before either. And I'd like to very much thank both the museum and the foundation for inviting me and for arranging it. So I will move straight on. Thank you very much for the introduction. This, as you can see, it's a painting by a Melbourne artist, Melbourne in Australia, Amanda Robbins, and it's actually a very large work, probably 2 meters by 1 meter, and it's a painting of the inside of a coat. So it's a coat lining. It's part of a series that she worked on around that. She's a painter and also a psychotherapist, so very, very interesting bodies of work she comes up with. Here's another one, open coat, Tudor rose. I love them. When this particular exhibition was shown, people were referring to them as the Vagina Paintings, and you'll come to see the relevancy of that during my talk. So I'm going to cover three broad areas. In terms of femininity and gender, I'll be talking about the performance of femininity, or femininity as performance. Many of you will be familiar with that concept already, but I'll be talking about it as well. I'll be talking about femininity, performance, the visuality of femininity, and I'll just quickly look at my notes, excuse me, and the mask of femininity. So performance, visuality, and mask of femininity. Then I'll be talking about techne. Lauren, as we know, is a crafter as well as an artist. So I was thinking about techne in relation to her work and trying to connect that with my own work as well. So I'll be talking about techne, which this is the best definition of techne that I've found from Tom Bolstorff, that it's human action that alters the world through crafting. So techne is about creating knowledge, but it's about creating knowledge through activity, and particularly through creation of something material. So it's a different sort of creation of knowledge than simply intellectual knowledge, if you like. And I'm going to talk about three areas of techne, if you like. They're three intertwined areas. That is techne as object, techne as craft, and techne as art. And certainly the boundaries between those three are very nebulous, so I'm not proposing that they're strict boundaries. And the case study I'm going to use to talk about techne is the vulva or vagina, and we'll come to that soon. And then lastly, I have two theories that I want to talk to you about, introduce you to. They're both not very well-known theories. And one is called media bodies. That is a theory that I've developed myself since about 2014. And it really is a theory that says that media and bodies are never separate, that we create media, certainly, but that media also create us, and that it really is a symbiotic relationship that is at the heart of contemporary cultures. So that's the theory of media bodies. And then I'm going to be talking about a very new kind of sub-discipline called surface studies. And it's linked to media bodies, but it's different and the same. So I'll be talking about surface studies, which is literally the study of surface. And that could be, so it's often also the study of texture, but that could be the surface of the earth. It could be the surface of fabric, all sorts of natural and human-made surfaces, and what they mean culturally. So it really prioritises the importance of what is above. It's saying that meaning lies in superficiality. Meaning lies in surfaces, and we don't need to always be digging underneath surfaces to find meaning, because surfaces, as of course all of the jewellers in this room know, and all of the jewellery lovers, surfaces have meaning and are very important. And I'm going to talk just about two particular kinds of surface. One is glitter and one is matte black. So I'll move right along. Okay, so on to the first part of talking about femininity. And this is the concept of femininity as performance. And I think it's something that, for me at least, underlies all of Lauren Kalman's work, or a lot of the work. Is, to me, you know, for all I know, Lauren's never thought about this, maybe she'll tell me later, but to me, a lot of her work is about femininity as performance. So this is a concept really brought into the mainstream in quite an extraordinary way since the 1990s by a theorist called Judith Butler, who I'm sure many of you are already very familiar with. And what she said in a couple of things she published in the 90s was that what we take to be an internal essence of gender is manufactured. This is for men and women. This is for masculinity and femininity. And it's manufactured through a sustained set of acts. A more simple way of saying this, a much more popular way, and a way that lots of people understand, including Oprah, who interviewed RuPaul about this quote, is, I'm telling the truth now. We're all born naked, but the rest is drag. And really what Butler means by that, and what RuPaul understands by that, is that gender is not inherent. Something like femininity is not something we're born with. It's something we learn. It's something we're taught. And we're taught it through selection of clothing, through the ways that we're taught are correct ways to walk, to sit, to stand, to speak. Some of these are directly taught to us, you know, we're literally told to do this and not do that. And some of them are just things we gather through our society, through our culture. Here's a great example. I call it manspreading. Lots of you will have heard the term manspreading. There's a little bit of a movement. There's a fantastic group, I think they're in Spain, of women who challenge men who are sitting on trains like this, taking up more space than they should. And it's very confronting when you see a woman sitting like this. But there is no biological, essential reason that women can't sit like this. There is no biological, essential reason that men should sit like this. So it's something we've learned, and it's just one example of what Butler and RuPaul and many, 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 many other feminists call the correct performance of femininity. So the idea is not that gender is performance. We do not wake up in the morning and have the freedom to say, what gender will I be today? I can have a performance as if it's theatrical. That's not what this means. This means that gender is a learned series of acts and behaviours that we internalise, and then that we work at, sometimes very hard work, we work at perfecting or at continuing to perform for the rest of our lives. I just want to, in a way, kind of pay my respects to Butler's latest work, which is very often about trans rights, about trans persecutions, and it's this last quote from her, much more recent quote, that really acknowledges that the performance of gender, if you don't do it properly, you are subject to violence and to persecution and to punishment, and that is no more relevant, that is no more clear than in the trans populations of the world. Women definitely feel it, men feel it to a lesser degree, but trans people really, really, really suffer because of the imperative to perform gender in certain ways. So some visual tropes that we often associate with femininity, and by the way, these are tropes that I think exist now. Tropes associated with femininity and masculinity change according to time and according to place. And a really good example is that in Victorian times, the colour pink was associated with little boys because it was actually about blood on the battlefield. And the colour blue was associated with little girls because it was thought to be the colour that many flowers are. And so that's just a very simple example of the ways what we think of as feminine and masculine are subject to change. So I think that these visual tropes are the ones that exist at the moment. Maybe you've got more, maybe you'll disagree with me on some of them. And they are softer colours or pastel colours, props without hard edges. If there are any props, they'll be soft, like flowers or fruit. The gaze is indirect, so the model or the subject in the photo won't look directly at the camera. If they do, it'll be a passive sort of gaze, a kind of come hither, I'm available gaze. So that's what I mean by the indirect gaze. Often they're quite childish, they're quite passive and playful. A sexual expression, but not a confronting, lustful sexual expression, more of a so-called innocent sexual expression. Very often you'll see feminine poses are lying down or sitting in ways that you would never see masculine subjects presented in. And they're also often very thin and unmuscular bodies. This, for those of you who don't know, this is the supermodel Gigi Hadid. Her mother is also a supermodel or ex-supermodel, Yolanda Hadid. And there's, let's call it video evidence of Yolanda telling Gigi to stop playing volleyball because volleyball was making her body too masculine. So, and that was because it was rather muscular, I suppose. And finally, the visual trope of femininity one of them that I'm going to really focus on is this idea of glitter or sparkle or shininess. So thirdly, in my discussion about femininity, this is the last point about femininity, is this concept of the mask of femininity, which is quite old. So Joan Rivera came up with this concept in 1929. She was a contemporary of Sigmund Freud's, and she was one of the very few women psychoanalysts, as I'm sure many of you know. She came up with this concept of the mask of femininity in response to noticing that many of her women contemporaries, who were also high-achieving, deeply intellectual women working in what was very, very, very much a man's world, she noticed that they were overplaying their femininity, if you like. They were performing their femininity to extremes with, you know, for example, very high voices, very tiny waists, very feminine clothing, etc. And she wondered why this was, and she came up with this concept, this theory of the mask of femininity, which was that by working and existing and claiming a place in men's worlds, these women were actually putting themselves at risk, sometimes literal risk of violence, either maybe intellectual violence, maybe in other areas, actual physical violence. And so to become more and more feminine in response to that is a mode of self-protection. It's a way to calm down the enemy. It's a way to say, don't worry, I'm just little. I'm just unthreatening, right? So this is what this, and Joan Rivera called that the mask of femininity. And of course, as soon as I saw this work of Lauren Kalman's, I thought of the mask of femininity. I don't know if that's what she thought of, probably not, but for me, that's what it's all about. Stephen Heath did some beautiful analysis of Joan Rivera's work. He did that in the 80s and noted that the mask of femininity is really troubling because it's like a tourniquet, it's resistance, it's passive and aggressive at the same time. It's resistance and whatever the opposite of resistance is at the same time. So there's this, it's this troubling. And I like that he described it as a tourniquet. So a tourniquet of resistance and disturbance, something that holds you. It holds you safe, but it also constrains you terribly. And with that, of course, I think often of corsets, and in particular for this talk, the incredible corset that Kim Kardashian wore to the Met Gala 2019, and I will come back to that. Mary Russo, in her brilliant book, The Female Grotesque in 1995, told us that femininity, when put on with a vengeance like this, when put on the way Dolly Parton puts it on, right, when put on the way that Kim Kardashian puts on, is really disturbing, because once we know that someone has put it on, once that becomes really obvious, we know they can take it off. And that then disturbs everything we understand and trust about the gender binary being somehow essential, somehow at the core of human being, rather than as a performance. So this brings me to techne, and as I said, I've got 3 parts of the techne. I'm not going to stay long on this slide, but I do think that Lauren Kalman's avatars is in a way, I find it an incredibly moving piece, almost unbearable actually, almost unbearable to watch because of the labour involved. To me, this video shows this incredible labour involved in the performance of femininity, but I would say also in the performance of a feminist femininity. And that really, I think, is at the heart of my work. It's trying to understand what a feminist femininity might be. I think that could actually apply to everything I've ever done. So thank you, Lauren, for helping me realise that. I'm not going to stay long on here. I'm going to move straight on. So I'm going to talk about techne in 3 ways, as I told you. Firstly, as object, then as craft, and then as art. And the case study I'm using is vulvas and vaginas. I'm writing a book at the moment about vulvas and vaginas. It's called The Velvet Glove. So what do we know about vulvas and vaginas as objects? The fact is, we actually know very little. We know far less about this body part than we do about almost every other body part, and far, far less than we do about male genitalia, penises, testicles, etc. You might think that maybe as you've been looking here, that top left picture shows just simply 2 different kinds of vulva. On closer inspection, it actually is a before and after picture. So the after is the one on the right, is supposedly the ideal vulva. So this is a vulva that has small labia minora, that has larger, plumper labia majora, that does not have protruding bits. And what you don't see here is the rest of what genital cosmetic surgery does, which is it will do things like reconstructing the hymen and tightening the vagina. And by the way, the vagina is just, let's call it the tunnel, okay? That's what the vagina is. This is not a vagina, this is a vulva. So the vulva includes vagina, vaginal opening, labia minora, labia majora, the clitoris, the urethra, and I hope I haven't forgotten any other, pubic hair, which is not here. Yeah. So we call it a vagina, but it's not. A vagina is only the one little part of it. Now, one of the reasons we don't know enough about vaginas is that in the 17th and 18th centuries, men took over from women in the delivery of babies because suddenly there was money involved. So midwives, disappeared largely, and male medics took over and became the experts on women's bodies. They wrote the textbooks and they still write the textbooks. And I have a bit of news that some of you might find quite shocking if, like me, you've lived for many decades knowing about the clitoris. But in fact, the clitoris was only officially discovered as an anatomical part in 1998. Yes, that is its official discovery. People knew there was a little external button that gave pleasure, but in terms of the clitoris as an internal organ, officially discovered in 1998. And this here is in the hand. That's a model of the clitoris as it is an internal organ. And only, I can't point here, but only the very top little pink tip is the bit that is outside the body. And just a little bit of self-promotion. Please visit the Vagina Museum. I'm one of the founding members of the Vagina Museum in London. It has a strong online presence as well. So vaginas and vulvas are enjoying a little bit of a zeitgeist at the moment. You've probably noticed. Somewhat prompted by Trump's, that thing he said, grab them by the pussy. You'll remember that lovely phrase he used, which really was part of what got women and queer people, feminists, out on the street marching against the president, against all sorts of sexual harassment. This was along with Weinstein, and making banners such as this one at bottom left. By the way, I wanted to include this bottom left image in an academic blog that I wrote for a university in the UK, and it was deemed too controversial. This is a piece of fabric, right? But I couldn't have it. And then we've got the ubiquitous vulva cupcake. We've all seen these. They're everywhere in popular media, the vulva cupcakes. And I have particular things to say about them that I might touch on later. And we're even seeing vulvas in fashion, so in this beautiful fashion sleeve. So they're entering our world as mainstream craft. They've always been frightening, taboo, horrific, should be hidden away, but they've also always been recognised as having power, as we can see from these two, and really a shill and a gig. No one really knows what they mean, these little sort of gargoyle vulva vagina creatures that appear on a lot of English churches. And then on the right we've got the devil actually being frightened away by a vulva. So, but this sort of contradictory, it's powerful but it's horrifying, it's a legacy we live with in terms of vulvas. And of course, this brings me to Teknea's art. And as soon as I saw this piece by Lauren, I thought of this one by Deborah de Robertis. It was obviously a piece of performance art that she did at the Louvre in front of the Mirror of Origin. And so we are enjoying this vulvic zeitgeist. Of course, artists have really led the way, but it's very much in the public eye at the moment. And I love the similarities between these two pieces and this medieval manuscript that shows the mouth of hell as, I think very clearly, as a vulva and a wide open vagina. So again, the power, but also the horror of this body part. And now I'm on to my theory section. And as I said, I've got two theories. I think I'm going okay for time. The first theory is media bodies that I've already spoken a little bit about. But I'll just remind you that for me, media bodies is about the ways that we cannot separate our bodies from the media that we create. And some of that media, of course, we create literally with our bodies, probably all of it in a sense. Some of that media is about our bodies, is based on our bodies, circulates around our bodies. There's a lot of anxiety around bodies in media, a lot of anxiety about, especially focused on young girls and teenage girls. Oh my goodness, you know, they're all going to look at Kim Kardashian and want cosmetic surgery. They're all going to look at models and they'll all become anorexic, etc., etc. We don't have similar concerns about boys. So that's very, very interesting that we feel girls need protection from the very media that they often really love engaging with. But we create media just as they create us. And I really love the work of Karen Barad, who's actually a physicist, but her work is very applicable to gender studies and to cultural studies. And it's similar to media bodies in that she says, we come about through others. We come about through the things that we create. We don't exist on our own first as these sort of pure entities that then are either corrupted or enhanced or whatever, that we actually don't exist without the things that exist around us. We don't exist without our environments. We don't exist without the things that we create. And I know you can all multitask, so I'm not going to read out the slides. But here we've got two quite extraordinary images of Kim Kardashian, both of them very controversial in their moments. The top one, of course, didn't always have the black lines. You know, in some versions it's completely nude. And it was what maybe we can call her nude phase, where in a way she discarded clothing. She became just important for her body. So clothing and adornment didn't matter for a while. That was about, That was 5 years ago, I think. And then I'm going to back and talk about this particular outfit as well that she wore to the most recent Met Gala, and I'm sure many of you have seen this quite extraordinary outfit that many people were quite frightened by and shocked by and kind of scandalised by. So, yeah, just thinking about media bodies and vulvas, part of the vulvic zeitgeist is kind of vulva as fashion or vagina as fashion. And we see this through white celebrities, that white women celebrities who are white, obviously, slim, fashionable, rich. These are the women who are, in a sense, allowed to have public vulvas, right? But then when they have them, when they publicise their vulvas, when they talk about their vaginas, it's in these very feminine ways, you know. Gwyneth Paltrow with her vagina candle. I don't know what the candle smells like. Someone can buy me one if you want. But I bet it doesn't. I bet it smells of flowers or something, right? So maybe I'm wrong. And then Cara Delevingne, who had her interior architect put in a vagina tunnel in her home in Hollywood, and she climbs through it and etc. And it's meant to be very radical and subversive, but really, look at them both. There's nothing radical here. This is vagina, vulva, as fashion, as a kind of adornment to say, I'm a little bit radical, I'm a little bit different, but in a really nice way. Don't worry, it's a little bit Mask of Femininity, actually. Don't worry, I'm still white and slim and nice. Yeah? Okay. We don't see black women, we don't see overweight women doing this sort of indulgent stuff about let's show off our vaginas. Okay. So this brings me to my second theory, and I'm just about done, really, only a few more minutes. And so surface studies, as I said, I think it's very closely related to the theory of media bodies. But surface studies really, as I said, it's an emerging discipline. It's come out of cultural studies. It's come out of geography as well. And it's a study of actual surfaces. It's a study that gives importance to the analysis and the examination of the superficial, of what lies on top, and says we don't always have to go delving beneath to find the truth. Truth can be right there, you know, staring at us. This is rather a frightening image, I know, but it really brings that sense of surface being important and of the surface of any message being important. And by that I mean, if, for example, we write a message and let's say we write it in ink in a certain font, and we write it on a piece of paper, but then we write that exact same message, the same size, the same ink, the same font, and we write it on flesh. The message is different, yeah? So the surface is important. The surface has meaning in itself. So surfaces are important. So let's go from maybe the sublime to the ridiculous, or maybe the other way around, I'm not sure, to glitter. And glitter is absolutely untheorised, except for this brilliant London-based theorist called Rebecca Kalman, who last year released this book called Glitter Worlds. It's a very slim volume. It asks lots of questions about glitter, but it really puts glitter on the map, so to speak. So this is the first, I hope, in lots of books and theorisations about glitter, shine, surface, etc., and their cultural, social meanings. A few quotes here from Rebecca Kalman. Two key takeaways from her are that glitter is stuff. Glitter is a thing, yeah? It's an object, but it's also a message. So that same message in the same font with glitter on it is going to mean something different to without the glitter. And crucially, she mentions that the enactment of glitter, and this is in the UK, and I suspect that it would be the same here, is very, very classed, in the sense that working class women are big on glitter, and middle and upper class women think or are taught that glitter is a little bit common, a little bit nasty, a little bit cheap, and it's too much of a good thing. And it was I'm stealing this idea, right? This is totally from Rebecca Kalman, but I did find this example on my own. This picture of before and after accompanies an article in the Daily Mail from way back 2012. And it really demonstrates what Rebecca Kalman's writing about glitter being about class. Because maybe looking at that picture there, maybe, like me, you're thinking it's before and after, and she, in many senses, we're not judging here, but in many senses, she looks kind of better in the after, right? She's more glowy, she's more, etc. We'd think that this was meant to give the message that this is a good thing, this is before and after. But it's very, very confusing, because while the picture gives us that impression, some of us, the article itself is very damning of the second look. The article is written by the woman who had the work done, and she describes the labour that was involved, the pain, the time, and the expense. And she really concludes that spending all of that labour, time, expense, etc., in order to look like this is a tragedy. It's an expensive, horrible tragedy. And that is a very much a classed, that is a middle-class woman pointing out what working class women do to look good and then demonising it. So that's just an example that I found but very much based on Rebecca Kalman's work. Okay, the quintessential glitter queens of our age. The three older Kardashian sisters, these are the Kardashian, oh no they're not, my mistake. It's 1 Kardashian, 2 Jenners. So this is Kim Kardashian in the middle, Kendall on the right, and Kylie on the left. And could we get more glittery? Probably not. They are at the Met Gala 2019, and the theme of that year was camp. Camp. Kim went as a wet mermaid. And if we're talking about the labour of femininity, it would be hard to do more labour than what she did to get into this dress. This dress, I guess if it could have been painted onto her, it would have been, but it wasn't painted on. She was sewn into it. First of all, sewn into a very, very tight corset. The dress was such that she could not sit down. So that meant she had to travel to the Met Gala in a special car with a high roof that she could stand up in, yes. And at the Met Gala, she couldn't sit down, she couldn't have the dinner, and she couldn't go to the toilet. So she had to be very careful. She planned this all in advance. She had to be very careful not to drink. Didn't have a sip and could not go to the toilet. So the labour involved in this version of femininity is intense, absolutely intense. Let me just quickly say, probably several of you have thought, they look like drag queens. Well, that's not a coincidence, because the Kardashians' early stylists and makeup artists were drag queens. And a lot of the Kardashian aesthetic is, in a sense, culturally appropriated from queer and from drag aesthetics. But it's also probably, more importantly, culturally appropriated from black aesthetics, UK black aesthetics, and we'll come to that. Okay, so this had been Kim at 2019 Met Gala. Of course, then we got COVID. She divorced from her husband. A whole lot of dramatic things happened. No Met Gala in 2020 because of COVID. What on earth was Kim going to wear in 2021? Everyone was waiting to see. And it really was shocking that she came as a shadow, as a faceless silhouette, as a nothing, as a negative. It wasn't just all in black, it was in the mattest black fabric that she could get to mould to her body. Balenciaga did it. Matte, when you look it up in the dictionary, it's defined, there's no definition for it. This is the dictionary definition of matte, used to describe a surface or colour or paint that is not shiny. So the definition of matte is what it is not. Matte itself is a negative. And my friend Catherine Clune-Taylor from Princeton said to me, I think of that Kim outfit as what it's like when you join a Zoom with the video off. So, she meant you're only digital, you're a nothing, you're visible and invisible. You're not really there, but you are there. What does it mean? So there were so many different interpretations, and they're still all spinning around the internet. What did Kim mean by this outfit? Maybe it was a comment about COVID and about us all existing online. Maybe it was a comment about the very recent Taliban new takeover in Afghanistan. Maybe it was simply in line with her ex-husband's new album, Donda, which is a completely matte black album. Lots of things going on there. I actually think that it was making a statement that Kim doesn't have to show her face anymore. Kim is now all silhouette. Kim is now recognisable just from her matte black silhouette, the same as Darth Vader, yeah? But also the same as Minnie Mouse and Catwoman, right? Many iconic superheroes or anti-heroes are recognisable in matte black, faceless, with no definition. They're flat, they're shadows. So I just want to go back a little bit in time in terms of popular culture and matte black, because I still don't know what this matte black means. I'm still trying to think about this Balenciaga outfit, and I'd really like you to, if anyone has any ideas, please, I'm very open. But here's one thing it could mean. About 10 to 15 years ago, some of you might remember, there was a fad for matte black cars. And the way it originated was with people who were really, it was a mix of wanting to aestheticize your car, or you might call it pimp out your car, but having no money. And matte black paint was the cheapest, right? So not only would you paint your car with matte black, you'd also make the car as black as possible. And it became a statement, it became an aesthetic statement. And like a lot of these powerful statements whose origins are born of poverty and of creativity that is necessitated through poverty, it became mainstream. And about 10 years ago, we began to see very high-end cars fitted out in matte black. And these cars, by the way, the word for them is murdered out. So a matte black car is a murdered out car. So Kim Kardashian is not immune to just taking from black culture, as we know she did with these images. Same photographer, same image, 30 years difference, and an absolute violation of some forms of black culture. The first image in 1976 was a violation of its own. But, you know, this is the most obvious way that one of the Kardashians has appropriated black culture. They all do it all the time in lots of more subtle ways. So, was her appropriation of matte black, was it an appropriation at the Met Gala? Was it similar to this, just taking an aesthetic that black culture had developed? Maybe that's another answer. And then this is a much kinder sort of answer. So another Kim Gordon, who's the singer and bassist of Sonic Youth, actually wrote a song about murdered out cars in 2009. And at the same time, she produced a series of artworks that were done in matte black, and they were all text-based. And both she says and interpreters of that song and of that art, like this first person up here, Tom Hollert, they say that producing in matte black is like an anti-production. It's against everything that glitter means. It's against consumerism. It's against commercialism. It's against the shiny, the new. It's actually making a political statement that is powerful because it is negative. So maybe there's a little bit of that in what Kim did. Who knows? She's a very smart woman. She could be being as ironic as she's being iconic with that outfit. And this is my last slide. Believe it or not, the picture on the left, that black shadow, that is Kim. This is in the garden outside the Met Gala. That black shadow is Kim, and the one on the left is her sister, who suffers from anxiety, and very smart commentary up there from someone on Instagram, me and my insecurities. I wondered about the Met because, of course, Kim is endlessly copied, right? And I wondered, when I first saw the matte black, I thought, this is not copyable. This is too strange to be copyable. If we take away the trains, if we take away the mask, all we're left with is a kind of black gym outfit, right? The outfit we all wear to the gym. So it's not copyable. It's not going to go to the high street, but it has. Because last week I was walking along Oxford Street and I passed the Zara store, and here's the picture I tried to take on the left. These are matte black outfits, right? but I couldn't get a good picture of them because there was too much shine, there was too much glitter, there was too much movement, there were too many mirrors in the surroundings. And that made me realise that the power of Kim using matte is that she stands out against all of that shine and glitter around her, much of which she created in the first place. So without all of the shine and glitter, the matte means nothing. So I'm really just looking and waiting to see what happens with this matte black version of feminine adornment. What will it mean? Where will it go? Will anyone buy this stuff? You know, I don't know. So that's it from me. Thank you. And now I hope we can have a discussion.
Thank you, Meredith. Thank you very much for this fascinating keynote. I would like to give it to the room. Who has a question for Meredith? Anyone? Don't be shy. I know it was a lot. I see one here. Stand up.
Hi. First of all, thanks for the lecture, really insightful. I'm not sure it's a question or a comment, but lately I've noticed how often Kim is referred to in lectures. And one thing I sometimes miss is taking into consideration the people around her, the culture around her, and also, for example, the way, for example, she was catapulted into stardom was by a video, porn video that her was released without her consent. Also, when you show, for example, the looks at the Met Gala, we keep on saying Kim, Kim, Kim. It's a team around her. It's an Anna Wintour that also knows about this. So sometimes I just wonder if it's the right thing to just use her body, and I think also the appropriation of her body, without talking about the culture, what we are interested by, what we ask of a woman like Kim. So
yeah, no, I totally agree. She's, you know, in line with media bodies and in line with Karen Barad's theory of a gentle realism. We are nothing without our environments. And in a sense, we all have a team, right? It might be a negative team, but yes, the teams around a cultural figure like Kim Kardashian, and that's how I like to think of her. Yes, I know she's an individual, right, with thoughts and feelings and all the rest of it, but I don't know, maybe we do get to see that, but I think of her as a cultural figure, as a thing that has been created by many teams, actually. By one team is her family, one team is, you know, you could call her sort of Hollywood history or legacy, which is very untheorised. And then, of course, there's all of the histories of drag and of her makeup artists, her fashion teams. And we must not forget Kanye. Because
exactly.
Yeah. So yes, she's kind of the thing that's been pushed up by all of these different cultural moments, and I like the word teams that you used. Yeah.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. There was another question over there. Yes, coming your way.
I'm Herman. I like to I have no voice. I lost my voice, but nothing to do with COVID. I want to make a point about one of the things you said, which gave a lot of rumor in this little studio, or what it is. I studied at the end of the 60s medicine, anatomy of the human body. And it is at that moment, so that is 50 years, no, what is it, 50 years ago. At that moment, it was totally clear that after the 6th week of the development of the fetus, the clitoris was like the penis, an organ. So what you said is totally not true.
Thanks for your comment.
Thank you. Is there another question?
I wanted to ask you, my question is about the first part of your lecture, so thank you for combining the mouth and the vagina and adding the color of glitter and black. But my question is about the mouth and the vagina, which fascinates me a lot. Throughout history and throughout many, many cultural references, as you already told, what goes in or comes out of the mouth or even the vagina has been seen as something that would sow terror or confusion, etc. And what I like about the topic that you've been trying to address, and also I think what I see in the work of Lauren, is taking back that agency, what goes up or down or in or out. But what I always find very, it's a sensitive and also difficult gesture to make. What do you add on it or put over it or put in it? What is your take on these gestures of what goes in and out the vulva and the mouth?
Oh, wow, thank you. That's a huge question, and I can't answer. It's more of a discussion, but thank you. I mean, of course, when we think of vagina and mouth, we think of vagina dentata, which is a horrifying image and which has been reproduced in so many different ways and still occurs. But to think about what goes in and out of the vagina and the mouth, and to think about that in terms of agency, is really quite radical. And I am having a chapter of my book that is based on a brilliant theory that is also little known, and the theory is called container theory. It's a theory of containment, of what can be held by what and how. And I've done interviews with people who have vaginas, and one of the questions I ask them is, what does your vagina hold? And I came up with that question from reading about container theory, but the answers I got were extraordinary. Like, I got goosebumps thinking about the answers that I got to that question. And it's really extraordinary, the answers, some of the answers that I got. Everything from, like, it holds my true self, to it holds all my pain, to it can hold anything. It's so strong and so stretchy, like from the physical to the spiritual to the emotional. So thanks for that about agency and what these things take in and what they push out. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to hear more about Lauren's thoughts about that. Thank you for answering.
Thank you. If there is anyone else, there's room for one last question. Otherwise, we have time with Meredith later. No? Okay. Thank you, Meredith.
Okay, my pleasure.
We'll see you in a bit. I have two mics. Oh, I think you have my mic. Sorry. I'm so sorry. Yeah. Thank you. All right, thank you, Meredith. Then I would like to ask Monique Hendricks to come to the stage. Monique Hendricks is an art historian. She works at LIMA, the Institute for Media Art in Amsterdam, as a junior conservator. In addition, she's an independent curator, writer, researcher, and focuses on contemporary media art, visual and digital culture, touching upon themes as identity, representation, the body, camp, and club culture. And she will give now a spoken column.
Thank you, Amanda, for the introduction. Also, thank you for the invitation to read to you this column I wrote today, which is about representation, gender, and the body in visual art and performance, to kind of sketch a broad context with examples on this theme. So the column is called How Artists Challenge Views on Representation, Body, and Gender, from early video art to expressions in drag and online selfies. In the 1960s, artists started using the body more frequently as a medium to express ideas about identity, gender, and sexuality. By altering their bodies, subjecting them to harsh conditions and durational performances, for example, especially female-identifying artists explored the position of women in society and gender norms through representations of the body. The body, in this context, is not merely a biological entity, but a representation, a symbol, a constructed potential site of resistance, protest, and appropriation that is connected to politics and social context. Pioneers like Marina Abramovic, Vali Export, Yoko Ono, as we see here, Carolee Schneemann, and Lydia Schouten used their bodies as a canvas. Female-identifying artists reclaimed control over their bodies by using them in performance, video, and self-portraits, and investigated how media images reinforced stereotypes and perpetuated the idealization of the female form. With the second wave of feminism kicking in and shaking up power relations in the world, many female-identifying artists felt the urgency and necessity to regain control over their representation and image in society and mainstream media. The aim was to present themselves without any mediation and to question stereotypical ways of presenting in art, moving away from the cliché of the male artist and the female model. In the same years, video art emerged as a new consumer technology, and videotape recorders became available. Not only because of their documenting qualities, but also because of its inexpensive distribution possibilities that didn't require the traditional institutional system. Many artists, including many women, turned towards the use of video. I will quote Laura Mulvey from the book European Women's Video Art in the 70s and 80s. Magical coincidence between the appearance of video technology and women's urgent need, inspired by early feminism, to find a new mode of expression through a new kind of art. Feminist film and video were both dedicated to challenging patriarchal tradition, especially its exploitation of the image of women in art and in commodity culture. And she also noted that video had no place in history of art and gave women artists an unprecedented freedom. The equipment was easy to use. An artist could handle the camera on her own, and perhaps even more crucially, the form had not yet been contaminated by years or even centuries of male domination. Decades later, a new technological innovation changed the world forever: the internet. The dream of democratization of the internet may have been the most drastic change in the run-up to the Web 2.0. Before, the internet was mainly used by a small group of specialists and technologists, also called the Web 1.0. So this new Web 2.0 enabled people with an internet connection to post, upload content, share, and communicate with each other. With the birth of the internet, the concept that self-expression and self-identification could be translated to online spaces gained popularity. Thanks to the Australian art collective VNS Matrix, British philosopher Sadie Plant, African-American sci-fi writer Octavia Butler, and as we see here, Donna Haraway's iconic text, A Cyborg Manifesto, the cyber-feminist movement gained momentum in the 90s. Donna Haraway said, "In short, we are all cyborgs." Her essay addressed artifice around gender norms and imagined the future of feminism, and proposed the cyborg as the leader of a new world order. Part human, part machine, the cyborg challenged racial and patriarchal biases. Cyber-feminist asked, can we use technology to hack the codes of patriarchy? And can we escape gender online? During this period, cyberfeminism re-theorized gender the body and identities in relation to technology. Cyberfeminists saw the virtual world as an opportunity to abandon the sexist social conditions of the physical world, where the boundaries between binaries, such as man, women, human, animal, and natural artificial, could be rejected. But as the dot-com bubble burst, so did the techno-utopian dreams of a radical feminist takeover. Despite the good intentions of the internet's early adopters, we now know that misogyny, racism, and bigotry are as prevalent online as they are in real life. The online world simply replicated the social conditions of the real world. In this spoken column, I would like to make a short link between early video art and performance art by female identifying artists that focused on the body and gender, and contemporary expressions in culture and visual art, by showing some examples of contemporary artists working with the body and gender. I would also like to pose the following questions. To what extent ideas about the body, gender, and representation continue to resonate in the 21st century context? Who is looking at whose body and through which gaze? What does it mean to place one's body in the public space of the internet? And how can female identifying non-binary and queer people take ownership of their bodies and disrupt the binary online? I'd like to start by taking the work by British artist Sin Wai Kin as an example. Sin Wai Kin is a non-binary artist living and working in London, and they use drag to question ideal images of femininity in systems of looking and representation. Drawing from close personal encounters of looking and wanting, their work presents heavily constructed fantasy narratives on the often unsettling experience of the physical within the social body. In many ways, the performance of drag itself, which is way more than wearing clothes of the opposite gender, can be seen as political activism, as drag challenges and disrupts the binary system while constructing queer identities, safe spaces, and connecting communities. It opens the door for various gender identifications outside the heteronormative binary system, through the embodiment of characteristics that can be described as masculine and feminine that are socially described to cultural norms. You could say that gender identity is never static or fixed, and that drag disrupts, challenges, and obscures gender constructs. Contemporary culture is dominated by images of bodies, of ourselves and of others, floating around in virtual spaces like Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. With this condition, the notion of presentation and representation of the self has become very important online. Through selfies and other personal content, a digital identity can be constructed. The selfie may have become one of the most popular forms of photography ever. They can express who we think we are and also what we want other people to see. Artists like Arvida Bystrom here, a Swedish photographer based in LA, use online self-portraits to explore notions of femininity, identity, and beauty standards. From a young age, this artist has seen the internet as a little window out of a very closed room of teenage depression. But now, Bystrom's oeuvre of selfies, music videos, and digital art have helped forge an online culture of body positivity and self-celebration. Here we see internet superstar Amalia Soto, better known as Molly Soda, who became famous through her videos and webcam performances on social media platform Tumblr. Her work researches the technological mediation of contemporary feminism, cyberfeminism, mass media, and social media culture. She asked what it means to be raised in the age of the internet, and how ideas about the female body and what it should look like can be questioned on social media. Armpit hair, body fluids, and periods are proudly showcased in her selfies and performances, revealing the female body as we rarely see it in mainstream media. A glitch is a sudden malfunction in technology, and often dismissed as an error. But in her new book, Glitch Feminism, which was published last year, Legacy Russell shows that liberation can be found within the cracks between gender, technology, and the body that a glitch creates. The glitch offers an opportunity for us to perform and transform ourselves in an infinite variety of identities. She asks, where do we create the space to explore our identity? And how can we come together and create solidarity? An artist working with this notion of glitch feminism and maybe even taking it further into hacking is Mary Magic. Magic is an artist based in Vienna, and since 2015 their research has centered on hormone biopolitics and how the methodologies of biohacking can serve to demystify invisible lines of molecular power. One of their most famous recent projects is a do-it-yourself protocol for hacking estrogen, demonstrating its potential sites for gender hacking. And finally, I want to introduce you to Tabitha Razer, who is a new media artist, intersectional preacher, health practitioner, and yoga teacher. Her practice explores decolonial healing through the politics of technology, navigating architectures of power, online and offline. Razer works tackles structures of coloniality and its effect on identity, technology, sexuality, health, and spirituality. And for me, these works I just showed, these artists I just showed, Razer, Magic, and also the book by Legacy Russell, are a new spark for cyberfeminism in our current times. Just as Donna Haraway envisioned, building and destroying machines, identities and categories, a new generation of artists, writers, curators, and researchers aims to incite an accelerated explosion of gender and bodies. In conclusion, female and non-binary identifying artists have always challenged gender norms and ideas about the female, femme, queer, and non-binary body for many decades. They have been challenging and are still challenging our views on representation. They question body ideals and beauty standards and disrupt binary ideas about gender in many powerful ways.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Monique, for your wonderful column. I would love to also invite Lauren and Meredith to come to the stage so we can join in a conversation where I also would really love to hear from Lauren how she reflects on what was just said. Shall I just start with a question, or do you already have something you would love to say?
You go ahead.
Okay, there I go. Well, as Meredith said, skin as a surface is increasingly being considered for its visually expressiveness, and I was wondering how you react to this as an artist.
Sure. Yeah, is this working? Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah. I mean, my practice has centered around both making objects and using those objects in performances for the camera, and that action is a flattening of the body. I mean, I think very much about the photograph as part of my work, and the sort of sterilization that happens when you translate a physical body into an image of a body has a distancing effect and a smoothing effect. Even if the body is showing something that is grotesque, there is a sort of kind of barrier between us. And I think that's some of the way that I'm thinking about surface in my work, but also, you know, the sort of ideal body as something that is impermeable, that is a complete facade that doesn't have interiority, that can't spill, vomit, shit, any of that. And so there are moments in my work where I try to reveal that sort of transgressive space between inside and outside. The mouth is like my favorite place because it holds so much sort of power and tension as both as a sexualized part of the body, as an erotic part of the body, how we sustain ourselves, how we, protest, and now, of course, in the era of COVID, the place where that is truly threatening, where disease can be spread. Yeah, I don't know if that kind of gets at what you're thinking at.
Definitely, yeah, thank you. And I would also love for Monique and Meredith to just also jump in and reflect, and please.
Is this working? Yes. I loved what you said about the photograph flattening the body. And one of the things I'm really interested in is the relationship between 2D and 3D. So the relationship between the dimensions that we see in an image and the dimensions that we see in the flesh, and with the, with the skeleton and all of the flesh and muscle on it. So it's not really a question, or it's just a comment that I think this is a tension between 2D and 3D that some of the most powerful and successful people in our cultures have, in a sense, mastered. So if we think again, about someone like Kim Kardashian and all of the cultural processes that have created her, she exists in both 2D and 3D in very powerful ways. So yes, she's flattened and very often deliberately does that to herself, and then there'll be a little bit of a pushback, and she appears, in kind of all of her glorious 3D in some ways. But weirdly enough, that 3D is often only seen through 2D. So it's just a very complex cultural tension, I think, that we all tread, but that some people tread more successfully than others.
I really liked what you said about the mouth also being a way of how we protest. Also, since I just talked about the body being a site of resistance, how is that prevalent in your work? I was just wondering.
The body as a site of resistance? Yeah, I mean, I think, I think very much about the body and the idea. So, well, let me back up and say, I am of a generation that started analog and transitioned digital. So I think for me, my work very much kind of reflects that kind of coming to terms with kind of media and the body. I have been, thinking a lot about the construction of the ideal, especially with the emergence of social media, which wasn't there when I started working, or was just barely there, and then became more prevalent. But this idea, that the body is constructed, the ideal is constructed, and that has historically been in the image of the white female body, which is a body that I kind of inherited and inhabit. And so my work, as soon as I started putting my body in my work, it had to deal with gender, it had to deal with race, because bodies are not neutral. And so kind of thinking about how I can use the power that I have in my body because of my, the body that I inherited, to kind of question those ideals or flip them. So, the ways that I do that are having the body be impolite, having the body spill or drool or be boring and just sort of hang for hours now, not be entertaining. Those are some of the ways that I think about the body, as a site of resistance. Tiny protests, I think. Yeah.
Thank you. Go ahead, Meredith.
Can I ask when and why, or what prompted you to begin using your body in your work?
Yeah, it was it was not intentional. I had always thought of myself as an object maker. I trained as a jeweler. I apprenticed in a foundry for many years, and then I went to get my master's degree in art and technology. And so at that moment, you know, of course, every physical training I had was called into question, like, why are you making things? Why are they jewelry? And so I started doing these sort of, they really were tiny protests, because I was in a master's program and I was like, didn't know what I was doing, and I was sort of questioning my training as a jeweler and this sort of like burden of sort of technical prowess and like this burden of knowing how to make something really well. And so I was literally like gold leafing my body, and I had to document that somehow. And so my very early images are me literally holding a camera out and taking, you know, some quick documentation. But that moment, that action of documenting, you know, something was captured in the camera, and that, like, something weird and charged, and that was a flip. You know, I recognized that the images held meaning just as much as the objects did, and they have different powers, right? I'm often asked, like, why perform, you know, why don't you do more live performance? I think that does offer something, but I think that performance for images also offers something. It offers an ability to do things you can't do in real life, even without editing. You know, just the simple action of cropping, you know, is a really kind of powerful, interesting gesture.
And do you now, like, knowing that a lot of people will encounter your work digitally, do you cater to that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's how I think my practice has transitioned, you know, over the years to being more focused, no, equally focused on how the image is transferred via media, specifically, you know, social media, how the work, you know, my most recent work are very, very short video loops, thinking about things like TikTok and the consumption of media, where the body kind of just perpetually moves in this loop. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm still very much, I love to make things. I will always make stuff, physical stuff, because that's what I love. And I think you glean something from seeing an object in person. I think there's a relationship to your own body that happens, so I think they communicate differently. But I think, you know, I do think very much that most people will have seen my work through images. In fact, that's how we're seeing it now. Yeah.
Thank you. And well, we're looking at your images behind us and looking at what materials you use. It's a lot of gold and glitter, I might say, shiny surfaces. And of course, Meredith just talked about matte black. Could you say something about that in reference to your work? How do you see the matte black?
Oh, boy. I don't think a lot about black, but I think a lot about white. Yeah, you know, I think, I mean, I guess I would think about it in relationship to the void of you know, the entrances in the body that I use. But I guess I'm very much interested in whiteness rather than blackness. But I think color, I mean, I think we think about black and white as not being colors, but they are. And they also have these really deep social and cultural associations that you know, I don't see the whiteness in my work as neutral. Like, it is not nothingness. It is very much a reference to an idea of whiteness, both you know, race, but also this idea of like sterilization, perfection, power, ideal that comes with that color. So I'm not answering your question about black, but I do think, yeah, I do think quite a bit about the colors that I'm working with and what they mean.
Yeah, absolutely. White is not innocent in that sense.
No.
Yeah. Monique, you had a couple of questions in your PowerPoint. Would you like to go back to some of them?
Yeah, but those are like really
Or they're
broad
too
questions.
broad.
So yeah, to what extent ideas about the body, gender, and representation continue to resonate in this century? Who are we looking at, and whose body, and through which gaze? I think that might be a really interesting question, right?
Yeah,
In relation to your work.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, well, I could very much get into a longer sort of conversation about like how we look at bodies through the internet and what that allows us, because I think, you know, in some ways we're very much can very much conform to a sort of archetype, but also this sort of digital space is a place where our bodies can be something they're not in physical life, and you know, and I think, you know, I think there is some power and agency in being able to craft that body, particularly if we think about it from a space of not, you know, of not an ableist perspective. Like, what does that allow disabled bodies to do in a digital space? You know, how can we be impolite in a way that we can't be in our normal world? How can we have you know, lives or our body behave in a way that we are constrained? And I think there's some potential in that, as much as there is this pressure to conform. You know, seeing your images of early feminists, you know, web-based work, thinking about the potential that was there in that moment, and how now narrowly focused we've become on these few social media platforms, that opportunity for expression of the body has become really limited in a lot of ways.
And also capitalist owned.
Yeah, yeah. Which is a conundrum in putting my work, and for any artist that puts their work on social media, especially those that use their body, you know, this idea of kind of this work that is both complicit in and pushing against the structures that it's employing. I don't have an answer for that, but it is a complicated.
Me either.
I love the phrase you keep using, the impolite body, and I'd like to know a bit more by what you mean by that, but also how it maybe applies to the use of your own body, because you tend not to use models, for example. How important is it that it's your body, and how is that impolite?
Yeah, well, I think about, you know, when I say impoliteness, I think it is really an intentional kind of reference to the construction of femininity, this idea that, you know, a la Butler, you know, gender is performed, and it's performed in these very sort of coded, specific ways. The female body being a body that has been expected to be small, you know, closed, you know, quiet, polite, and that, you know, the opening of the body is something that is impolite. Using the female body in a forceful way. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about impoliteness. You know, and letting, you know, I think these are most of the images here you're seeing are the body looks pretty okay, but there are parts of my work where I don't look good, like my eyes are rolled back in my head, or just it's the body not looking at its best, which is everything we're taught not to do with social media, right? So thinking about that and can you repeat the second part?
It was about how using your own body is impolite, like rather than a model.
Yeah.
So I imagine with a model it's a bit more distanced, but that immediacy of the artist's own body, is there something impolite about that?
Yeah, I haven't thought about it that way. You know, the way that I've thought about it is kind of in relationship to critiques of early feminist performance, where the body is you're objectifying your body in the same way that that everyone else is. But I think, I don't know. I mean, I approached it from really kind of an ethical standpoint, that I couldn't pay a model to do what I'm doing with my body, and you know, or, you know, my work breaks the skin, it's uncomfortable. But maybe also it circles back to, you know, the conversation about the construction of the female body as one that should be passive, and a lot of what I do requires durational performance, or even like some athletics, like some like really extreme physicality. And, you know, maybe it's that kind of manifestation of my own body that is sort of implied or not.
Yeah, like you used that word force before. So, you know, force is so active. It's you know, the opposite of a kind of passive femininity. So.
Yeah, and that even that passive femininity, that like stillness is actually a very hard thing to achieve. You know, I think about, you know, sort of having, you know, Kim wearing her wet mermaid dress and having to be still for that long. That is a feat of endurance. Yeah.
Yeah, I just quickly also wanted to go back to the gaze. What Monique's question was, who is looking at our bodies and with what gaze? And I was wondering how we could control that gaze. And then Meredith, you talked about masquerading sort of violence. And I was wondering if you could also reflect on it, Lauren.
And how to control the gaze. I mean, in the end, I am curating all of the images that I put out into the world, you know, and so there is that control that I have. Once they leave me, that you know, I lose control of, and I don't know. Yeah, I don't know that I have an answer, but it is, you know, I am very carefully constructing everything that I put out. So it's not random. It's not, and it's
Thank you. Because Meredith, you also maybe
just wanted to say you're not the only one, because the power of the selfie, right? The selfie. You said it was the most ubiquitous form of photography we've ever known. And everyone is curating themselves in every selfie. So it's a worldwide, ubiquitous change in the ways that we control our images.
And in some ways, it's really powerful. Like the selfie has really changed how we project ourselves in the world. It's not a passive action, or totally frivolous, I don't think.
Thank you. No, I totally agree. Yeah.
And of course, Kim Kardashian's first book was called Selfish, and it was a book of selfies.
Okay, I did not know that. So, but I think talking about the selfie, but also the mask. So you put yourself out there when you make a selfie, but you also put a certain mask on, right?
Sometimes literally, using filters, using makeup, using lighting. Yeah.
Do you want to say anything?
About masks?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I'm very much excited to look into theories of the feminine mask, because I do think about, you know, the covering the face as something that is simultaneously empowering and repressive. And the masks that I use in my work, I very much hope, fall in a space that is ambiguous, that they don't read either as something that is kind of forcefully put on the body or necessarily electively worn, that they kind of occupy the space of being both and you know, I think I pull from a lot of history of masking, from, you know, executioner hoods, which empowered the practitioner, to gimp masks, to the you know, mourning garments, you know, and thinking about how masking can be both powerful and oppressive.
Thank you. Monique, you also had another question in your PowerPoint. How can female identifying non-binary and queer people take ownership of their bodies and disrupt the binary? And I was wondering, I mean, it is kind of obvious in your work, but how can you relate this to jewelry and body adornment?
And that's such a big, such a big task. And I will say there's so many people working on this project of disruption, and I think in some ways my work is very safe in that regard. But, well, that's how I feel, at least. I think that the way that I'm thinking about disruption is through like close examination of the historical ideals of the body, that it's a looking backward. I'm very excited about folks working, with speculative futures, but I think that my work is very much in a kind of analysis of the things that have led up to, the body at this point. I look at a lot of historical objects, historical medical images. I'm very much interested in, late 19th, early 20th century theory and how that has percolated into and permeated our contemporary constructions of the ideal and gender and the body. So I think that's kind of how I think about what I'm doing, is this sort of like filter back, lens.
So it's looking back. And I was wondering, also listening to you, and you were questioning, what is this black mat gonna do? And I was wondering if we could already think of that, like we have had the history, of course, leading up to what we now have, the glitter. We have the black mat, and I was wondering what in 10 years it will be. If we can think, like, would they exist next to each other? Will we have something completely different? If we also look at cyborg feminism, like where will it go?
I think we would wear it online, like you now have designers designing things we can wear online as a filter, or I think that would be the next step, I guess.
Yeah, I know there are people in New York working on garments that are digital in the sense of, in all sorts of ways. They're digital in the sense that they're computer programmed to change what they look like throughout the day, or to change their warmth levels or their revealing levels. But then also the clothing for our avatars, and indeed the bodies of our avatars. There's no reason for our avatars to remain in human form. So maybe that's the sort of thing we'll see in a decade. I want to be a jellyfish. So.
I don't know if you want to
I'm
add
going to
this.
leave the theorists to speculate on what's coming next.
Okay, thank you. I think, Meredith, you probably had some other questions also from your presentation.
I just did want to ask Lauren about glitter and how important is because I noticed that the gold at least the gold that we see in the images that are available, is a very shiny, sparkling gold. So how important is that? But also I think some of your white is polished and shiny, and some of your white is matte, am I right?
Most of it's matte.
Okay, yeah. So could you talk us through the decisions around those surfaces?
Sure, yeah. Oh, I love shiny things, though. I think so shiny is both a reference to sort of production jewelry, but I also, I think about particularly shiny gold quite a bit, and how, much like you were talking about glitter and its relationship to working class, that, gold and gold jewelry in particular, kind of massive quantities of it is associated with working class, with Black culture in the United States. Really the sort of the privilege that comes with being able to wear gold as a white woman and not be kind of denigrated for doing that. I think a lot about gold, and it's just like its high-low potential, that it can be classy when worn in small quantities, but when worn in large quantities, it doesn't kind of fit mainstream expectations for the material. And so my work uses copious amounts of gold. So it kind of moves between those spaces of referencing class and then also referencing kind of the grotesque, and that the grotesque quantity of gold. And I think, the matte white is it's a semi-matte. So the ceramic work that I do is this sort of semi-matte. And so it's both, this reference to the body, like the fleshiness of matteness, but also the sort of sheen to it is a throwback to, functional objects like toilets and sinks and the tools of the body that we use. So it is both a body and also a tool of the body, kind of moving in that space. Yeah.
I think there's a lot more to be said about matte and shiny manufactured surfaces and how they sort of ping against the human skin, which is thought to be grotesque when it's, for example, sweating and shiny, but less so when it's matte or semi-matte.
Yeah.
And then decoration is mostly shiny if we want to decorate our body.
Yeah, we haven't got a sparkling tattoo yet. All tattoos are matte as far as I know. Yeah, just waiting. Maybe that'll be the next decade, things, sparkling tattoos.
I'd like to see that.
I would love one.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you so much. If there is no other questions from Meredith or Monique or Lauren yourself, or anything you want to mention that we haven't yet? Oh.
Thank you for being impolite.
Yes.
I feel like I'm in good company.
Well, then I want to thank you so much, and we will continue with Martijn.
And we will continue with the second part of our program for today. It's a bit shorter. One moment. I'll just put this here so I can do my speech. Lauren, you're seated. Dear Lauren, dear guests, every other year the Françoise van der Bosch Foundation honors the unique and work and I need my glasses to read and voice of a jewelry designer of outstanding qualities. Since 1980, we have put spotlights on work by 21 internationally jewelry makers. It is an honor to have several award recipients here today. I'm pleased to see the winner of the last edition, Lin Chang, in the audience. And today, the name of Lauren Kalman is added to a list of industrious jewelry makers. The aim of the Françoise van der Bosch Award is to pull attention to a maker with an influential body of work and a unique voice. Well, we've all seen that in the images behind you in the talk. The jury of the 2020 Françoise van der Bosch Award consisted of Lin Chang, already mentioned, last winner, jewelry maker and professor at Central St. Martin's in London. And Joe Bloxham, also present here, independent curator and collector. Vanessa de Gruyter, you're here, curator, applied arts, and now, since your jury membership, also a member of the board. Anders Ljungberg, silversmith and professor at Konstfack in Stockholm. And Theo Smeets, jewelry maker and professor at the Hochschule in Trier. The jury recommended the award being given to American artist Lauren Kalman, and I quoted from the deliberation. Lauren Kalman is a maker of objects relating to the body, creating wearable objects as well as performative pieces and installations that expand the concept of body ornamentation. Her practice is a crossover between craft, performance, and visual art. Using the body as a metaphor, she creates visually provocative pieces that challenge what jewelry and body ornament can be. Through her work, she investigates sex, gender, power, and beauty, relevant themes that are bigger than jewelry discipline alone. And we've probably proven that to you today. For her contribution to the field of contemporary jewelry and crafts, Lauren receives the 2020 Françoise van der Bosch Award. The jury was, by the way, unanimous in its choice. Lauren, it is a tradition with the foundation to commission a young, talented jewelry maker to make a trophy. This time we've asked jewelry student at the Peter Behrens School of Art in Düsseldorf, Eleonora Radke, to create a piece especially for you. Eleonora, can I ask you to come forward and present your object? Lauren, would you please step forward? Yeah, can you do that after? Okay. Yeah. Eleonora, would you like to do it before? Yeah, okay. Eleonora, so we keep the suspense a bit longer for you, the audience. Eleonora, can you present your project to Lauren and the rest of the audience? Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm happy to be here with you. I'm Eleonora Radke. I'm a ceramist, but I work multidisciplinary, and at the moment I study at the University of Applied Science in Düsseldorf, the new craft object design department. And it's a great honor to be invited by this respected foundation to create the Winners Award for Lauren Kalman. I invite you to join my journey with the following, and we can start the presentation and the sound right now.
Laute hervorbringen, die durchschließen und plötzliches Öffnen der nassen Lippen und der Zunge entstehen.
Schmatzen is the German word which means to produce sounds by closing and sudden opening of moist lips and tongue. But there's no direct English translation of this word, and the German definition captures the word better, so I worked with it. In the process of creating the trophy, I've made many experiments and explored different materials, shapes and sizes, which led me in the direction of the finished piece inspired by Lauren's works. While exploring Lauren's work to create this trophy, the concept of visualizing the sound of bodily function formulated. The inside of the mouth is an unusual area to place jewelry, and that made me not only think about the feeling of wearing a piece like it, but also about the sounds that occur while wearing it. So I created a visual experience out of this sound. And looking at the finished piece, I recognize many more linked aspects to Lauren's work. So congratulations, and I hope you can find pleasure in receiving my trophy.
Maybe we can do this right here. The official presentation. Can you?
Where would you like me?
Can you hang
Yeah, but can you hold it?
this? Yeah. Congratulations, being the 2020 winner of the Françoise and Bosch-award. You receive also, apart from this beautiful trophy, a check for €5,000. And some Amsterdam flowers. Would would you like to say something?
Yeah, can I pass these off to you for a sec?
Yeah.
This was the awkward bit. I was really excited to get over. I don't receive praise well. So I'm just going to say a few short words. You don't want to hear me talk. You want to look at my stuff anyways. But I did want to take a moment to express my gratitude and thanks. It really, truly was a fantastic honor to receive this award. I'm in really amazing company. I'm kind of blown away by the other people who have been part of this cohort, and I'm really humbled and honored to have been selected, because I know there are so many other jewelers and makers out there that are totally worthy of this honor. So I'm really grateful for that, and I'm really excited to see who comes next in this lineage and how the face of the award changes. So that's quite exciting. I want to give thanks to the Van den Bosch Foundation's board. They have, especially Martine, you've all worked so very hard to make this event and all the things surrounding it happen. It's a lot of work. We spent a lot of time talking about my work today, but artists need supporters and curators and museums and art handlers, and it's a huge team of people that makes all this stuff happen and allows us to do what we do together. So thank you all for that. A huge thank you to Meredith and Monique for your presentations. Y'all are way smarter than I am, for sure. So thank you for contributing your ideas to the conversation. It's really been such a great pleasure to meet everyone while I've been here, and I'm blown away by everybody's generosity surrounding this event. Eleonora, there you are. This is just exquisite. Thank you so much. I'm really thrilled. And finally, thank you to Amanda and the museum for hosting this event and asking really great questions. And thank you to everyone here and online for being here. It really is an honor to share this with you. So yeah, thanks y'all.
Well, that sort of rounds off this afternoon. Lauren, I'd like you to stay here. We're going to take some photos with the speakers, with Eleonora, with the board. I can invite you all for drinkies. The conundrum is a bit that, of course, with the new regulations, we can't all pile to the Zadelhof Café. We have to sit down there. But we also have a sort of an alternative. You can still visit the museum. I would recommend doing that, looking at the jewelry on display. And there's even the possibility of going downstairs to the cafe and have some drinkies there. But thank you very much for your attention. Thank you for you being here. Thank you for the online audience as well. And have a pleasant afternoon. Thank you.